Welcome to Lighten Up, a show about bringing more love, light, and joy into your life, and archived on the Lighten Up program page. Please join us in the chat room by clicking on the chat room icon located on the left-hand side of our menu bar. Now the host of Lighten Up, Isabel Merians.
Welcome to Lighten Up with Isabel, your good news show. And today I have lots of news to bring to you. This is probably one of the most exciting shows for me that I have ever done. It's really quite remarkable. And it's almost unbelievable because the story came to me. And I'm bringing you a story today which is really, really important. And it's about 3 forgotten years, about the detainees of Jews in Cyprus. I'm very, very fortunate to have the story brought to me. It was brought by, just coincidentally, by a beautiful new friend of mine whose name is Rivka Alter. Rivka, would you come up from the audience and just come right up and just smile so everybody can see how lovely you are?
Hello, I'm so proud and happy to take part of this wonderful
event. Thank you so much. Rivka and I became friends quite recently, and she told me that she had been born in Cyprus, but that she was an Israeli, and I thought that was sort of interesting. Why Cyprus? And she began to tell me the story. And that's the story that we're telling today. And I'm very fortunate to have David Yogev. Is that the right pronunciation?
That's the right name, yep.
And it's part of his history and part of Rivka's history. Essentially, the story is about 3 forgotten years that most people are not aware of, and yet it's a very important part of history. After the Holocaust, we all know that terrible story of the 6 million Jews who were killed, among them 1.5 million children. But we don't know the story of the Jews who tried to get to Palestine after the camps were liberated. And this is the story for today. The story was that in 1939, Britain issued a white paper stating that they did not want any more Jews in Palestine, which they controlled, and that they would not sell any property to Jews in Palestine. So what happened was, when the camps were opened and the people were liberated, there were about 500,000 Jews still alive, and many of them wanted to go to Palestine. But after going through all the horrors of the camps, to their continued horror, many of the ships carrying these people to Palestine were intercepted by British naval ships, who instead routed them to Cyprus, and they had set up detention camps in Cyprus. Both Rivka and David's parents were among those people, and you have to imagine how very strong they were to continue to have the spirit and the energy and the forethought and really the gumption to move forward after all of this. Now, David, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the camps. Mm-hmm. About how many Jews were interred in the camps during that 3-year period?
Well, there were around this 3 year period like 52,000 people. 2,200 babies were born over there.
Yes.
And it was an heroic thing that in the Jewish nation after World War II, you have suddenly a place where you have 2,200 babies born in one place.
Yes,
and this was the place, and I was born there, and Rivka was born there. And even though we met only a week ago, we are brother and sisters.
Of course.
That's how we feel.
I'm starting to feel like you, my brother and sister also, even though I wasn't born in Cyprus. But the interesting thing was that Rivka was telling me about an organization that it's really interesting to me at this point in history that you have an organization which is going to try to build a museum in Cyprus to honor the memory of and the name of the organization is?
the Organization of Cyprus DP Camps detainees.
Right.
We were actually detainees in such a camp that was for displacement people who went through all around Europe.
Yes.
So we were captured. Not myself, because
Your
I was just born there, but my parents were captured there by the British, and they were
brought.
detainees. So
Yes.
I couldn't find a better word for it.
Could you tell us a little bit about the camps, what the conditions were like there?
Sure. It was a British camp on the island of Cyprus, which was very hot. The British found it to be a very good solution to bring the Jews who were not supposed to come to Israel, according to what you said earlier, and they put them in kind of a detention camp and to withhold them to come from Europe to Israel, because the British didn't want, as you said, the Israelis to come directly to Israel. So the camps were just like...
They were like tent cities, right?
It was like a tent. It was like made out of... there was a winter camp and there was a summer camp. Conditions were very bad. But I have to say that the conditions, they were not bad as they were in Europe, but they were very, very bad. And the main problem of, let's say, my parents was that they've been exiled again while they were on the way to Israel.
Of course. Well,
I mean, is it Moses coming in again and saying, I'll show you the country and you will not be able to go in? Mm-hmm. So the main point was, hey, we're just so close to get there, to get to our goal, to get to our country, to go to our homeland again. Right. And we are being shipped back to Cyprus. So this was the terrible thing.
One of the things that I had, first of all, I want to ask you a little bit about the organization. Talk a little bit about the main purpose and how those of you who are children who were born there have now come together to form the organization, and how you're sort of still finding each other, which is a remarkable story in itself.
It is a remarkable story because, let's say I'm 71 years old, and we never even dealt as a grown-up in Israel about the concern that we were really born in Cyprus in a detainee camp. I was educated in Israel. We never mentioned about these things, and we never knew about these things. And suddenly, at the age of 70, to all our group, it just started to burn out from all our guts, just because we found that those stories are not known.
Well, exactly.
In Israel. I mean, as you mentioned before, there are 3 lost years. I mean, between the end of World War II and the recreation of the State of Israel, which was at 48, and everybody thinks that, World War II finished, and then we have the State of Israel. No, there were 3 heroic years. There were 3 heroic years that people were going through in order to come to Israel. And this is part of the story.
Absolutely.
So we decided that if nobody knows about it in Israel, we must do something. Right. And as you can understand, we were working all the time, and we were going and live our life, and our parents never told us a thing about it, because as Holocaust survivors, they don't want us, the kids, to know and to get hurt by that. So they didn't tell anything. They just said, go on living, we'll give you anything you need, just keep on your life. And then when we start to find out about this history, I'm starting to find out that I have never learned about this period of time. Right. And my kids didn't learn about this time, and many other people didn't learn about this period of time. So we just did one time a tour to Cyprus with a group of children, of other people who were born there, because we suddenly find each other. And at that time, we were starting to tell the story like we've been doing with Rivka and with some other families. And it came out to be that we started to feel like our parents. I mean, we were all kids. We were all 70 years old kids, babies. I call it 70 years old babies. It was an amazing thing, but that's how we felt. Mm-hmm. And we came out from this 1-week tour like brothers and sisters again.
Yes.
And we swore that we are going to to commemorate, and we're going to endow everything, and we're going to put everything that they had in these camps, we're going to put them into museums. We're going to tell the stories to those kids who don't know about it.
Yes.
We want to go to the educational system in Israel, formal and informal, because so many stories are being told, but this one is not being told. And we felt like we had to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very interesting that you're doing it at this point in time. And it's also interesting that we're doing this show today, because today is...
Well, today is the 71st anniversary or Independence Day of the State of Israel.
So that's serendipitous, right?
I have to tell you, Isabel, that you didn't even realize, and I didn't even realize when we talked about it first last week, only because I'm just a visitor here in Tenafly with my son, and we didn't pay attention that we have the date.
No.
And you pinpoint the whole beautiful and heroic story in this Independence Day. So thank you very much for that.
It's my great pleasure. It's my very great pleasure. Britain has never really recognized or acknowledged or apologized in any way for their behavior. It seems that they wanted to keep Palestine an Arab state, and they thought there were too many Jews coming in.
True.
And so that was their thinking, but they have not assumed any responsibility or any apology, or they should be Well, anyhow, I don't want to.
I have to say that it was very bizarre about the British behavior, because when they came into Israel at 1918 after World War I, we helped them to come. I mean, the Israelis who were living there, about 400 to 500,000 Jews, and they came in, and it took them about 20 years to be okay with us. And suddenly, after they realized that there is a crisis with other neighbors, with the Arabs in Israel, they just turn their face into them, and they say, okay, you don't come anymore. We put the white paper, we say only so and so. But after World War II, how can you limit to 1,500 a month when there are hundreds of thousands of Jews coming out from the ashes in Europe?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Now, one of the things that I did want you to speak about was the first baby boat. I do know that we had talked about this. We had talked about the fact that nurses and teachers occasionally came from, it was in Palestine, of course, came from Palestine into the camps to give some help. And I know that there was a great deal of material help provided by one of the
Jewish Joint AJDC? AJDC is the...
they sent food and medicines, and they did what they could to be helpful, and they provided additional food, I understand, as well as other products. But I think the fact that you had told me that there was a big problem with the babies that were born there. There were 2,000 babies born, but 160 died either during birth or before 6 months, because the conditions were not so wonderful, they were not so sanitary, there was illness, there was lack of proper sanitation.
Yeah.
And at some point, obviously, I imagine one of the nurses said, you've got to get 700 of these at-risk babies out of here.
Correct. Actually, the babies were born, and as I know the stories from home, babies were dying daily. The amount of babies, as you mentioned, it's about around 160 babies that were born there and died on birth, and from diseases. They had typhus at that time.
Yeah, I know.
And you asked me about the conditions in the camp. As I said earlier, the conditions were pretty reasonable for guys who came from the Holocaust, but still no hygienic, no treatment, and they had to send doctors from Israel and nurses from Israel. And I was born in June, which is coming next month, but then winter is coming in, and doctors who came. Dr. Falk, who came from Israel to help, he said those babies during the period of winter will not survive in those conditions.
Wow.
So either you made the different conditions or you send them directly to Israel. So the first action that was taken was to take out 700 babies with their families, extraterritorial from the numbers that the British allowed them to come,
Right.
and say you have to ship a boat to Israel.
And I remember you telling me they spoke with the British ambassador, and he said, the babies can go, but not the adults.
It was an amazing thing, you
Which
know,
is
because
absurd.
in the stories they mentioned that, okay, we'll take the babies, you stay here, you come later, we'll put them somewhere together.
Sure.
Then everybody yelled, of course, and they said, okay, only the mummies. And then the fathers came in.
Well, then
and
Golda
they
Meir
said-
came
and
in.
then Golda Meir, he was at that time a very important person, and she knew the American way, and she talked to the British, and
She got permission.
stories saying that she was really shouting at the base commander over there, and he said, well, I don't want to talk to her again. But they made it. They put a special warship with 700 babies and with
Parents.
1,400,
Parents.
of course, parents. And we came, me and some others, if I'm not sure, were you there, Yonineat Tinokot? No, the baby ship, but 700
They got
700
them out.
babies with all the families that came directly to Haifa. And they've been spread all over the country, and that's only because of Mrs. Golda Meir,
Right.
who were,
Well, she was a very powerful.
she was a very powerful
person,
and she
and
was
very effective leader, especially at a very dramatic time when you think about it.
yeah.
So now,
Just one more thing to add.
yeah,
It came out to be that we came to the state of Israel. I was 5 months old already because I was born in June, and it was in November during the mid-winter. It was 29th of November, which was the date that the United Nations declared the state of Israel in the United Nations here in the United States.
you brought him good luck.
So it was an amazing, I mean, as far as history goes, well, at the ship nobody knew what is happening, but
Of course.
at that time it was amazing thing to learn about it 70 years later.
Wow. Well, let me ask you this. Once Golda Meir got those babies out, which was really quite remarkable with their families, you had mentioned earlier that there was a summer camp and a winter camp.
Yeah.
Now, would you explain the difference? I didn't know there were two different camps.
Yeah, it was two different camps because the people came in throughout the year, so they had to put them someplace.
Right.
So the first actually started with the winter camp because they were built first.
Right.
But then they had to build summer camp because the summer camp were
It was very hot there.
very hot. I mean, everybody was looking for water,
Yeah.
and you see many pictures of people standing and waiting for waters and trying to reach for waters and so on. It was not the best summer camp.
I'm sure.
It was not, and
like
it
we
was not
think-
the winter camp as well.
No.
And then, how do you put the families together? How do you put the youngsters together? And I have to mention that all this community over there is a Holocaust survival with all of their problems.
And
I'm not going to go into that emotional problem that they had, but it was terrible from that point
I'm
of
sure.
view. It was terrible, and we have stories. I mean, heroic stories. How people just jump into the water to get food from someplace they could get. And of course, the Cypriot people itself, I'm talking about the Cypriot guys, they helped our parents a lot.
Well, that's
They
good
brought
to
them
know.
some food.
That's good to know.
The population of Cyprus, which were also occupied by Britain, by Great Britain, did help us a lot on that issue. So they brought food, and they did
Whatever they could do to help.
Since we have only 35 or 40 minutes more, I have a story for 30 days, so I'm
I
not
know.
going to
It's-
tell
it's
all
a
of it.
very big. It's a
But
very big story.
they were very, very cooperative, and we appreciate it very much. Only last year we made a special circle over there in Haifa, a cross for Mr. Papa Vasilio, who
Oh,
was
yes,
this guy.
You told me that he was Italian.
He was a Cypriot.
Oh, he was a Cypriot.
He
You
was a
said he was
Cypriot.
a smuggler.
He.
There
You
are
don't
a
want
lot
to
of
go into all the
smugglers.
stories of the heroic story, but he was actually helping simply to smuggle young Jews out of the fence and to bring them to Israel and to fight for the independence war. I mean, kids who came in with no parents or with one parent, they all their life they were longing to this hour, and they said, just let me go and fight for my country, because think of it, just to mention it, the 2,000 years the Jewish nation did not hold weapon in their arms, being surround the world. And when they had this opportunity, they said, we'll jump on the fence, just send us.
Right.
So he helped this, and they sent him, and
Well,
we are here.
it's remarkable. It's a remarkable story. It's
Yeah,
truly
it
a
is.
remarkable story. Now, one of the things that interested me was, what did the people do inside the camp all day long? Did they study? Did they, how do you maintain any kind of normalcy in such a desperate situation? I know there were 12 different camps, and you
Yeah.
told me there was a Jewish leader of each camp.
Yeah.
Would you just address that a little bit, please?
Yeah, it's it's kind of contradiction, but all the way of life, it has been managed through the Jews. I mean, they had their own committees, and our parents just elected people
to lead the group.
and the
Lead
British
the
did
camp.
not come into the camp.
To
So from the
interfere.
humanitarian side, I mean, even though there were not enough food and not enough water, nobody from the British guards came in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my parents saw them only on the towers. They were just skipping, so there will be no runaway.
Right.
But they did not interfere in the daily life. And the people of Israel, the state of Israel, the young state of Israel, pre-independent, they send instructors.
Oh, nice.
And they send doctors and they send nurses in order to make something out of it, because
Right.
it was otherwise
It would have been
many would
chaos.
have been it would have been a chaos.
Sure.
So they had schools, and they had kind of they call it a place of that you put the boys when they are born, the freshly born boys.
Right.
And they said that they have a very nice place to put them in. When I found out with the nurse that we have reached in Jerusalem few months ago, and she said, yeah, it was with the white linen, that's all. And babies were just, I mean, my mother actually had to feed 2 boys. I know that, she told me. Not enough food, not enough water, not enough sanitation, not enough anything of being able to handle to provide proper things to the babies.
Right.
So it was really tough from that point, but they didn't interfere. And what the people were doing, they were learning about what are they going to do in Israel, and they had a lot of groups, subgroups, politically. The Israeli politics started over there. I have to say there were more than 25. My father used to have a saying, when you have 2 Jews fighting with one another, I mean, talking to one another, then you have 3 parties.
That's right.
So we have many parties over there, and they had a long time to recap with what happened all over, and to tell the story, and to get organized, to start new life in the new country. They knew that by the end, after a year or 2 or 3, they would come to Israel. They knew it.
Yeah.
So that's what they did over there,
Wow.
and they were actually preparing themselves to come to Israel. Some of them learned Hebrew, some of them made arts. You find so many, at least 10 arts, well-known arts, that were teaching other stuff, how to draw and to make drawings. And one thing I have to tell you, because it was Holocaust people who came out of the Holocaust, you saw something unique. I'm sorry I don't have an example of that, but the Cyprus stone is very soft. So the people started to make, as commemorating their beloved one who got lost, they made small monuments, like small as this, big, and they made it and they graved it and they put names, and it was like a small cemetery for them.
Wow.
And this was the thing that they were holding all the time with the names of their parents or the son or the loved one, to honor them. And we have some of them around in Israel, and this is one of the things we want to put into the museum, because this is so unique to these camps in Cyprus that it is unbelievable. People when they come at my age to see that, we just cry.
Sure. Well,
and it's one of those touchy things, very emotional.
Yeah. Well, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about Cyprus in the popular media. Now, there was a film called Exodus that was done years ago that was a very big film. Paul Newman was in it, and Joan Woodward, and it was quite a big film. Now, the film started, if I remember correctly, it was a long time since I've seen it, it started with a landing at one of the camps. But I don't know if anyone realized that they were landing in Cyprus. Do you know of that? I'm not sure about it.
Hollywood is Hollywood. They go everywhere. They just put the right title, so they go where the title goes, right?
That's true.
We remember these movies. There were actually 2 or 3 movies. One of them is the Exodus, and our friends that has a separate organization, because I'm going to speak about the Exodus ship in a moment, but they made a very special movie on the Exodus, and the Exodus was really a very important story, because it came to be, it was the final word politically, that the British committee came in to see what is going on. The United Nations sent a committee to see what it is, and then what happened is the worst of sending the ships back and forth.
Yes.
So from the public opinion, you're talking about the media, from the public opinion side, Exodus made the 29th of November possible, because it was so tough, and I think hundreds of people, Truman sent a lot of people, England sent a lot of people, they stood on the Mount of Carmel and they just watched what the British are doing to the Jews in that ship. They didn't let anybody to go down, and they didn't want to send them to Cyprus. They didn't want to send them to Cyprus. So, Bevin was doing it, the British guy, the British foreign minister at that time, and he sent them back, can you imagine where? Back to Europe. How do you take people who came from the Holocaust, who came from the ashes, and you send them back there instead of sending back to their homeland?
Well, didn't they also try to send them to America?
No.
Which was the ship that came to America and that Roosevelt wouldn't allow to land?
No, there was not a ship that went to America. It was just what Truman did is he was putting political force against the British, telling them stop making quanta about how many Jews came in. Just let 100 Jews go in.
Yeah.
But after Exodus, it did happen. So because the story is terrible about Exodus. That's why they made the movie. Right. There was 3 decks with 2,000 people on each deck. The head commander. And we know the guys, we know their sons, again, in our age, and we are communicating with them. And they mention all the time that this story was, they just put every deck and they send them with another ship. One of them were sent to Hamburg, one of them were sent to München, and one of them were sent to I don't know where in France. And now they commemorate things. They do very similar things to what we do, and they make conventions over there and stuff, and they commemorating the heroism of their parents. Right. But this was the situation.
Now, I wanted to ask also a little bit about the fact that you were not citizens of Cyprus. You didn't have citizenship.
No.
And you didn't have British citizenship. So you were basically displaced persons.
By all means.
So now, when you got to Israel, did you receive citizenship from Israel?
Yes, we
So-
did receive citizenship from Israel. There were many problems, legal problems with it. Hey, are you his son or her son? Show me. You couldn't.
You had no papers.
No papers.
Of course.
So it was all done. I didn't have a birth certificate until I was the age of 17, I think, but that I have to go to the army and to
Wow.
show something. But we were not. Even though the British law said that whoever lives in their, whoever is born in their soil should have a British citizenship,
They never
it was,
gave it.
No, because we were illegal, so-called.
Yeah.
Illegal. So they didn't, of course, allow it. They didn't even try to apologize about what they were doing. I mean, nowadays it wouldn't have happened because the civil rights groups would never let such a thing happen. Look what is going on around the world with the refugees right now. I mean, people are going and coming from one place to the other,
There
good
are
or bad.
millions, there are millions and millions of refugees
Yeah, but at that
today.
time, Mr. Churchill or Mr. Bevin decided that they don't want to put more than 1,500 a month when you
Yeah.
have 500,000 wandering around.
Well, I did see that after Israel got its position as a free country, the British released and transported about 1,500 Jews from Cyprus to Haifa for a period of time. And the final evacuation was in December of 1948. And the ones that were left there were 10,200, mostly young men of military age that they had held back because they knew that those would be the ones who would be the fighters. So I thought that was really very interesting. Now,
The word is not interesting. This was the most cruel thing that they could have done.
because
I
these
mean,
guys were so anxious to get there.
They were anxious to get there, and we were no more detainees.
Right.
After the State of Israel has been established on
They-
May 15, 1948,
They had to let them go.
why don't you let me go?
Right.
I'm not a detainee anymore. But they could have done whatever they want, and they
Yeah.
were very favor of our neighbors over there, so they didn't let us in.
Really terrible. Now, in terms of honoring and remembering, you mentioned to me when we spoke before about 200 American sailors who were very helpful during the internment. Could you address that?
Well, I have to say that the United States of America was much more supportive with the Jews and with the American government at that time than we can ever think. I mean, can you imagine that you take, first of all, from the personal point of view, like few hundreds of Americans, of young Americans at the age of 16, 17, 18, 19, and the commanders were 22. They said, okay, let's go, let's steal some ships and bring the Jews from Cyprus to Israel. So we call them Machal, Mitnadvei Machal, the guys who were volunteers from the outside countries and helped Israel.
And you said there were about 200 American
There were
sailors.
200 American sailors that were doing the work on those ships without any money. Some of them had to be exiled from one place to the other. Some of them made tricks that the movies cannot tell. And some of them, well, we know some of the stories only. And one of them, well, I have to admit that, I was very much lucky to be here at that period of time, because at West Point, they made just a week ago, they made a commemoration service for
David Marcus.
For David Marcus, Colonel David Marcus, who was the highest rank of American who got killed in Israel as a volunteer. And he was actually the one who has formed the Israeli army to make it work.
This was a fascinating story. David Marcus was originally had a different name, and he was a colonel in the U.S. Army. And after the Second World War ended, he resigned and went to Israel and helped because he knew military strategy and he knew about organization. He helped form the Israeli army, and they made him a general, I think.
Yeah, they made him
And
a general.
obviously
He was the first general in the Israeli army.
Oh,
It was an amazing thing. I mean, he's... and again, people don't know about
these
it so
stories.
much.
And you told me recently that he obviously had gone to West Point
Yeah.
because they honored him at West Point, and you went up to the honoring ceremony.
We went to the honoring ceremony,
lovely.
which is being held every year at this period of time. So this was
That's
the first
lovely.
time I was participating
And Rivka.
with Rivka.
And 3 of the
And
sailors.
well, he was the one that was volunteering, but the whole group of sailors went through him at that period of time and made all this kind of stuff. I mean, they had money from I don't know where. I mean, they act like I don't know how, and they got the money somehow from the Jewish
And they were smuggling.
people, and they were smuggling. I mean, the main word that I've learned is smuggling and cheating and being ready to do anything. And when the
get
guys
freedom.
tell the story that people were trying to recruit them, then Moritz Greenfeld is saying he's one of them who lives in Israel. He said in a movie, he said, well, when somebody came and trying to recruit me, I asked him how much am I going to pay, and he said, what do you mean? Nothing. Then I said, okay, then I'm going. This was the Jewish spirit of the American Jewish nation, and the Americans by themselves who helped us so much at that time. It can only be, I could have only hugged them.
Really, that's wonderful. Now, is there anyone else that you'd like to mention in terms of honoring them? I mean, I think your parents were truly remarkable, and Rivka's, and all of those who had babies in Cyprus. I mean, they're just remarkable people. I do remember you telling me about the walk that your parents had to make.
I have to say one thing first.
Yes.
Before that, yeah, we did especially things about a year ago, but the word survivors of Holocaust contains so much in it. I mean, think about 200,000 people who are being shipped to get killed someplace, and 200 of them survives. Who are the survivors? I mean, what kind of people they are?
They had to be very strong.
They had to be the ones that will not do whatever they're being told. They were the ones who fought. They were the one who was struggling and went to the partisans. So, and these are the people who established the state of Israel. So we are blessed to have the first generation of Jewish survivors to build the country, because the country is a miracle.
Yeah,
If you think what is
absolutely.
going on in these 70 years, it's another story. But these guys were extraordinary, each one of them. I mean, and my parents, they had, again, to smuggle and smuggle and smuggle. They had to come from Poland and Russia and to go through day and night Vienna, and they
Austria.
had to go through Austria, and they had to come back to the closest point to go to Israel, all the way down to Italy.
Well, I
So-
think you told me that you take your family each year and walk the same route that they had to follow.
Well, you wouldn't
get
believe
there.
it. So being 70, my parents did it at the age of 24, 25.
But even so, they were probably weakened by the Holocaust.
They were weakened, and they were doing it at night, and my
Sure.
mother was pregnant with me.
Wow.
And we have movies. I don't know where they got these films from that time, but it was amazing. And when my wife said that I'm going to celebrate my 70 years, she said, what do you want? At what restaurant? And I said, on top of the Alps. So we did it. I mean, this was my way of telling the story to my kids.
Of
My
course.
kids came with me. I have 3 boys, and my sister has 2 girls, and we all went together to that. And we did a whole day march all the way up to the Alps. It was in June, and we did it in daylight, and still was snowing, and we had everything we needed. And there was a guy who is actually running this thing, and he said to us, and your parents didn't have shoes, and they didn't have clothes, and they have to do it through the night, and they didn't know where they are going to do it, so it's much easier for you, so go up fast. And it was an amazing experience, amazing experience.
Well, this whole story is really riveting to me. I think it's so important, and I'm so happy to be the one who's bringing the story in with Rivka and David today. And I want to thank my audience and my viewers, and I hope that this will be really enlightening because it's really 3 forgotten years. And thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. And thank you, my viewers from here and around the world, and I appreciate your continued viewing. And thank you for watching Lighten Up with Isabel.
Thank you very much, Isabel. It was great to be here. An amazing thing you did for us.
Oh, well,
thank
you. It's my great pleasure.
Until next time, remember to live a more joyous life. Lighten up.